In the beginning, there was only a void, a chasm, where ice and fire met, a place of raw power and potential, caught between the frozen realm of Niflheim and the fiery expanse of Muspelheim. From this chaos emerged Ymir, the great primordial being, a creature unlike any other born from the elements themselves. To the Norse, Ymir was both creator and sacrifice. From his body, a group of powerful gods would shape the world. These gods, known as the AESIR, were beings of strength, wisdom, and fate. Led by Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, the AESIR slayed Ymir, and from his flesh they formed the earth, from his blood the seas, and from his bones the mountains. Even the sky, they said, was fashioned from Ymir's skull. For the Norse, life came from life, and creation required destruction, an eternal cycle known as Ragnarök, the promise that one day all things would end and begin again. These gods, the Aesir, made their home in Asgard, a realm high above the mortal world of Midgard. From Asgard, they would watch over creation and shape the fate of both gods and men. But creation did not end there. Together, Odin, Vili, and Ve fashioned the first humans. Asgard and Embla, from trees by the shore, breathing life, senses, and movement into them. These were gifts that bound humanity to nature, an understanding of the world as one great interconnected force. Humanity would live, thrive, and die beneath the great ash tree Yggdrasil, the world tree, which connected all realms, including Asgard and Midgard. To the Norse, Yggdrasil was more than a tree. It was the very structure of existence. Its roots stretched deep into the underworld, and its branches held the heavens, binding all life in one vast, interconnected cosmos. Under its boughs, the first humans found purpose, part of a cycle guided by fate, from which no one, god or mortal, could escape.
This Norse creation story offers us a glimpse into their unique worldview, a universe built on raw nature, destiny, and a connection that transcends human life. To live was to be a thread in the great tapestry woven around Yggdrasil, and Ragnarök was the thread that reminded them all things must end, only to begin again. For the Norse, these creation stories were more than ancient myths. They were the very framework through which they understood life, death, and the world around them. The renowned scholar Neil Price describes how these beliefs, woven into Norse cosmology, shaped a unique worldview, one that saw life as fleeting yet deeply connected to an eternal cycle. The Norse people believed they were part of a vast, interconnected web, with every life tied to the past, the earth, and the gods themselves. This worldview inspired resilience and acceptance of life's hardships, where death was not feared but seen as a return to the cosmic order, a journey into the halls of the gods, or an eternal rest under Yggdrasil's shadow. According to Price, this sense of belonging to something greater, yet accepting life's impermanence, profoundly shaped the Norse approach to everything, from family bonds and the honoring of ancestors to bravery in battle, exploration, and even the relentless pursuit of glory. It was a worldview that merged fate and freedom, where one's legacy mattered more than one's life. This belief, deeply rooted in creation, guided the Norse to live fully, to seek out adventure, and to face death without fear, knowing they were part of something timeless and divine. Through this lens, we'll explore the Viking Age, not just as a period of warriors and conquerors, but as a complex society bound by a shared understanding of the world and their place within it. In this series, we'll journey beyond the familiar image of Vikings as raiders, diving deep into their lives, beliefs, and the enduring legacy they left across Europe and beyond. With Neil Price's perspective guiding us, we'll uncover how these Norsemen understood life and death, exploring how this worldview powered their courage, creativity, and conquests. The Viking Age, a time of warriors, explorers, and far-reaching conquests. This series will take you beyond the raids and battles, diving into the heart of Norse society, where myth and reality intertwine. We'll journey from the origins of the Norse people, forged in the rugged landscapes of Scandinavia, to the fierce expansions that saw them claim lands from England to the shores of Byzantium. We'll uncover the secrets of Viking craftsmanship, the power of their mythic beliefs, and the enduring influence of the sea on their way of life. Join us as we explore the foundations of Norse spirituality, their gods and heroes, and the relentless drive for honor that fueled their invasions and settlements across Europe. Each episode will reveal the depth, diversity, and lasting legacy of the Viking Age, an era that reshaped the map of Europe and left an indelible mark on history. This is more than a tale of conquest. It's the story of a people whose legacy lives on in art, language, and legend. Welcome to the Viking Age. When we speak of the Viking Age, most think of a period from around 750 to 1100 AD, a time of fierce raids, seafaring warriors, and distant conquests. But this view, while popular, is both limited and outdated. Historians and archaeologists, like Neil Price, have shown that the roots of the Viking Age stretch back much further, with elements of Norse culture, trade, and seafaring influencing the world long before the first recorded raid on Lindisfarne in 793. To understand the Viking Age, we must look beyond the battles and the voyages, back to an evolving society of skilled craftsmen, farmers, and traders who were connected to the world centuries before their name became feared. Scandinavia's early communities had built complex social and trade networks across Europe, with Roman coins, Baltic amber, and artifacts from as far as the Middle East appearing in Norse lands as early as the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. These early interactions reveal a Norse world already experienced in trade, diplomacy, and even exploration. The people we call Vikings did not simply emerge as raiders in the late 8th century. They were part of a long cultural evolution that prepared them for their later expansions. Defining the Viking Age purely by its raiding years would be like defining an entire culture by its battles, overlooking the centuries of development, resilience, and adaptability that led them to the seas. By starting our story here before the raiding began, we gain a deeper understanding of the Viking Age, seeing it not as a sudden eruption, but as the natural progression of a society deeply rooted in exploration, trade, and a desire for connection across distant lands. And so, as we journey through this series, we'll explore the full depth of Norse culture, beyond the outdated timeline and narrow stereotypes, uncovering the rich and complex society that set the stage for the Viking Age as we know it. When we hear the word Viking, images of fierce raiders and warriors often come to mind, but the term itself, Viking, didn't originally refer to a people. It described an activity, a way of life for those who set out to raid, trade, and explore distant shores. To go Viking was to embark on a journey over the sea, a bold endeavor that required skill, resilience, and a spirit of adventure. The people we know as Vikings were, in fact, Norse, a diverse and complex society rooted in Scandinavia. While some among them took up raiding, the Norse were far more than warriors. They were skilled craftsmen, building ships that would cross vast seas. They were farmers, raising families and communities in the rugged landscapes of Scandinavia. They were traders, forming networks that stretched from the British Isles to Byzantium, bringing goods and ideas back to their homelands. To call them simply Vikings overlooks the rich and multifaceted society that defined them. They valued family bonds, honored their ancestors, and lived by a code of resilience and adaptability shaped by the harsh northern climate and the endless possibilities of the sea. While the Viking Age may be remembered for its raids, the Norse identity was built on far more than conquest. It was a culture of exploration, craftsmanship, and a deep-rooted connection to both the land and the sea. A civilization with a vision that went well beyond the sword. As we delve into their world, we'll uncover a society as sophisticated as it was resilient, a people whose legacy of exploration, artistry, and storytelling extends well beyond the warrior stereotype. Over the past few decades, historians and archaeologists have unearthed a much deeper understanding of Norse culture, revealing a complex civilization defined not only by its warriors, but by its artisans, traders, and storytellers. Scholars like Neil Price have been instrumental in changing the way we see this world. Neil Price's work delves into the cultural heart of Norse society, exploring the beliefs, customs, and practices that defined their way of life. His studies in Norse religion, burial customs, and social organization provide a rich context to a world often overshadowed by tales of raids and conquest. Thanks to scholars like Price, we can see the Norse people as they saw themselves, part of a vast, interconnected cosmos where every life was woven into a complex web of fate, family, and the forces of nature. Long before the first Viking set sail, the lands of Scandinavia were home to ancient societies with deep cultural roots and technological achievements. The Bronze and Iron Ages in Scandinavia laid the foundation for what would one day become Norse society, shaping their customs, skills, and connections to the wider world. Historian AESIR Rosedal explains, the early Scandinavian societies were far from isolated. They maintained long-distance contacts and adapted innovations from mainland Europe, laying the groundwork for a unique, multifaceted culture. Archaeological evidence paints a vivid picture of these early societies. The Bronze Age, beginning around 2000 BC, saw the rise of communities that were increasingly connected to the rest of Europe. Trade networks spanned across the continent, bringing materials like tin and copper from faraway lands to Scandinavia, where craftsmen forged bronze tools, weapons, and ornaments that showcased their skill and artistry. As archaeologist Christian Christiansen describes, the Bronze Age was a time of expanding horizons, with Scandinavian societies integrating trade and artistic influences from regions as far as the Mediterranean. During the Iron Age, beginning around 500 BC, Scandinavia experienced a transformation. With access to iron ore, local craftsmen developed advanced techniques in metalworking, creating robust tools and weaponry that would define Norse society for centuries to come. Iron allowed for stronger, more versatile tools, and it revolutionized agriculture, enabling communities to clear land, farm, and sustain larger populations. Neil Price notes, the introduction of iron fundamentally changed Scandinavian society, fueling not only technological growth but also population expansion and social complexity. Burial sites from the Bronze and Iron Ages offer insight into these early societies' beliefs and social structures. Elaborate grave sites with goods and personal adornments reveal the beginnings of social stratification, suggesting that some individuals held higher status within their communities. Warriors were buried with weapons and wealthy individuals with jewelry, signifying a society that valued both power and craftsmanship. James Graham Campbell explains, the placement of grave goods reflects an early Scandinavian value system where wealth, skill, and status were carefully curated in life and death. Even early jewelry reveals their ties to a larger world. Amber, the gold of the north, was highly prized, traded from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean, while bronze pieces crafted with European techniques showcase the influence of continental art on Scandinavian design. These connections to distant cultures through trade weren't just economic. They also introduced new ideas and practices, slowly shaping the Scandinavian way of life. The Iron Age also saw the rise of fortified settlements with defensive structures and organized layouts that reflect a growing awareness of power, territory, and security. Clans and tribes began to form alliances and rivalries, laying the groundwork for the competitive yet collaborative society that would emerge in the Viking Age. According to Søren Michael Sindbæk, The formation of early fortified settlements marks a shift toward organized defense and political alliance, a foundation for the Viking Age's regional power structures. As we uncover the story of these early Scandinavian societies, we see the beginnings of a culture steeped in craftsmanship, connected by trade, and organized by social rank, a foundation that would eventually evolve into the Norse culture we associate with the Viking Age. This was a society ready to expand its horizons with the skills, connections, and resilience that would fuel an era of exploration and conquest. Archaeologist Martin Carver observes, "The Iron Age society in Scandinavia set the cultural and social stage for the Norse expansion, laying a resilient base for what would become the Viking Age." Early Scandinavian society was shaped by a decentralized, tribal structure where communities were organized around clans led by chieftains. These chieftains were not kings in the sense of absolute rulers, but leaders who wielded authority through respect, skill, and alliances. Each clan or tribe controlled its own territory, which might be a single village or a small region, with chieftains acting as both protectors and decision-makers for their people. Historian Peter Sawyer describes this society as a patchwork of small territories, each led by a local chieftain whose power depended on his ability to maintain order and defend his people. Competition among clans was a natural part of life, as each tribe sought to secure resources and defend its lands. Conflicts were common, but they were rarely about total conquest. Instead, they were often matters of honor, disputes over territory or rights to resources like grazing lands and fishing waters. Raids and feuds became part of the social fabric, with battles sometimes leading to temporary shifts in power. Yet the overall balance between tribes remained dynamic and fluid. According to scholar John Hines, the tribal conflicts of pre-Viking Scandinavia weren't about expansion, but maintaining balance, a complex dance of rivalry and mutual respect among the clans. Yet rivalry was balanced by alliances. Chieftains would often forge bonds with neighboring clans, creating a web of interconnected support that strengthened the entire region. Marriages were frequently arranged as strategic tools, solidifying alliances that could last generations. These alliances were essential for survival, allowing clans to support one another in times of hardship or external threats. As archaeologist Charlotte Hedenstierna Jonsson notes, inter-clan alliances brought stability, creating a patchwork of loyalties that allowed these societies to adapt to challenges collectively despite their fragmented structure. This environment of rivalry, tempered by cooperation, created a resilient society. While clans could be fierce rivals one season, they might form alliances the next, especially when facing a common threat or to settle disputes peacefully. The bonds formed through marriage, trade, and mutual defense gave early Scandinavian society a stability that enabled it to thrive, even in a landscape often marked by harsh conditions. Historian Birgit Sawyer writes, "The flexible alliances of early Scandinavian tribes reveal a culture that valued both independence and collaboration, a duality that would come to define Norse society as it evolved into the Viking Age. This loose, tribal organization laid the groundwork for the competitive but cohesive society that would later shape the Viking Age. As these clans adapted, cooperating as much as they competed, they created a social fabric that could withstand internal conflicts and adapt to external pressures, preparing Scandinavia for the coming centuries of expansion and exploration." Long before the Viking Age, early Scandinavian societies were already connected to a larger world through trade and cultural exchange. Evidence shows contact with the Celts, Romans, and Germanic tribes, which shaped their technology, warfare, and cultural practices. These interactions were not limited to Scandinavia. The Norse people were both recipients and contributors in a network that spanned much of Europe. Archaeologist James Graham Campbell states, Scandinavian societies of the early Iron Age were integrated into European trade and cultural networks, exchanging goods, ideas, and influences with the continents. Contact with the Celts introduced the Norse to distinctive metalworking techniques and artistic styles that would leave a mark on Scandinavian craftsmanship. The swirling patterns and intricate designs seen in both Celtic and Norse artifacts hint at a shared visual language, likely spread through trade and skilled artisans. Celtic influence is particularly evident in early Scandinavian jewellery and weaponry, where similar motifs appear, adapted into the Norse aesthetic. Historian John Haywood observes, the early artistic exchange with Celtic societies suggests not only trade, but a cultural admiration, as Norse artisans incorporated Celtic motifs into their own designs. Roman influence on Scandinavian society is one of the most significant examples of early European contact. Roman coins, glassware, and pottery have been found in Scandinavian sites, suggesting that these items were valuable trade goods. These exchanges introduced the Norse to new materials and technologies, as well as to Roman goods that were likely seen as luxury items. The presence of these artifacts reveals that early Scandinavians valued Roman craftsmanship, incorporating imported objects into their social and cultural lives. Neil Price notes, the discovery of Roman artifacts in Scandinavia underscores a long-standing connection, with Roman goods likely serving as symbols of status within Norse society. This contact wasn't only material, it brought exposure to Roman military techniques and organization as well. Although Norse society remained distinctly independent, they adopted certain Roman strategies, particularly in the structure of small militias and defences. These adaptations lay the groundwork for the Norse focus on strategic fortifications and warfare organization, which would later be integral to their success. Scholar Birgit Arrhenius emphasizes, Roman influence went beyond goods. It introduced Scandinavian societies to concepts of structured warfare and defense that would echo into the Viking Age. Scandinavia's interactions with Germanic tribes were equally impactful, influencing everything from language to ritual practices. The similarities in burial customs, particularly the use of weapons and personal items in graves, suggest shared beliefs about death and honor among these societies. Germanic tribes also shared with the Norse a pantheon of gods and similar mythological frameworks, setting the stage for the complex Norse mythology we associate with the Viking Age. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis-Davidson explains the Germanic cultural and religious exchange provided a basis for Norse myth and ritual, bridging similarities that would develop into the distinctive Norse identity. These early interactions show Scandinavia as far from isolated. Its people were both influenced by and influencing their neighbours, acquiring knowledge, goods, and ideas that would shape their society. These exchanges laid the foundation for the interconnected Norse culture that would later propel them into the Viking Age, a time when they would expand these networks across Europe and beyond. Historian Leszek Gardewa reflects, Scandinavian contacts with Europe during the Iron Age were vital in developing the trade, skills, and social complexity that would define Norse culture. Scandinavia's geography was both a gift and a challenge, shaping the lifestyles, skills, and traditions of its people. Norway, with its towering mountains and narrow fjords, offered breathtaking views but limited arable land. Communities here had to make the most of scarce resources, leading to a reliance on fishing, hunting, and eventually seafaring. Historian Sverre Baga notes, Norway's geography, marked by fjords and rugged terrain, necessitated both resilience and resourcefulness, setting the stage for a seafaring culture that would later drive Viking expansion. In Sweden, dense forests covered much of the landscape, offering an abundance of timber but also creating a natural barrier between communities. This isolation fostered small, self-sustained villages where agriculture and hunting could support limited populations. Yet the forests also supplied Sweden with the resources for shipbuilding, as tall, straight trees provided the materials that would later define Viking craftsmanship. Archaeologist Mats Roslund describes this landscape as one that fostered independence and ingenuity, where natural resources were carefully managed and early communities developed a deep understanding of the land. Denmark's geography, in contrast, provided fertile plains ideal for farming. The mild climate and open land allowed for larger-scale agriculture, which supported denser populations and led to more complex social structures. Danish society could rely on the land to a greater degree than its northern neighbours, but Denmark's position between the North and Baltic Seas also made it a crossroads for trade and cultural exchange. Historian AESIR Rosdahl explains, Denmark's geography, with its fertile plains and strategic location, fostered a society grounded in agriculture and interconnected by extensive trade routes. While each region had unique resources and challenges, the sea was a unifying force across Scandinavia. Norway's fjords, Sweden's rivers, and Denmark's coastlines all fed into the North and Baltic Seas, turning these waters into vital highways for travel, trade, and exploration. To access resources, communities often had to navigate these waterways, honing seafaring skills over generations. As Neil Price notes, Scandinavian geography necessitated navigation across rugged landscapes and harsh seas, fostering a maritime culture that would later define the Viking Age. Geography drove the early Norse to become highly skilled navigators, using the sea not only to access resources, but to connect with neighbouring regions and establish trade networks. These early journeys across fjords and rivers laid the foundation for a culture built on exploration, resilience, and adaptability, qualities that would propel them into an era of expansion and influence across Europe and beyond. This challenging yet resource-rich land shaped the Norse people into skilled navigators and resilient communities. With each journey across their rugged landscapes and seas, the early Norse developed a unique relationship with their environment, one that would serve as the backbone for the Viking Age. Scandinavia's climate posed harsh challenges for its people. Long, dark winters and brief growing seasons meant that agriculture alone could not sustain early Norse communities. With only a few months to plant, grow, and harvest crops, farming required intense labour and careful planning. These conditions demanded resilience and led to a reliance on both the land and the sea. As historian Robert Ferguson explains, the severe climate and limited growing period forced Norse society to be industrious, maximising their brief summers and relying on supplementary sources like fishing, hunting and trade. Because survival depended on the ability to store food for the winter, Norse families cultivated skills in preservation, using techniques like drying, salting, and fermenting to extend their supplies. Grain was ground and stored, fish were salted, and meat smoked, each household prepared to withstand the long, unforgiving winters. These methods allowed them to sustain themselves even when the land was barren. Archaeologist Dagfinn Skray observes, the short agricultural season in Scandinavia led to a culture of meticulous resource management, with communities adapting to extract the maximum value from their environment. During the colder months, the Norse focused on craftsmanship, developing skills that allowed them to create durable tools, weapons, and trade goods. Woodworking, metalworking, and textile production became essential during these off-seasons, as they crafted items that were both practical for daily life and valuable for trade. This reliance on craftsmanship led to the development of high-quality goods that would later make Scandinavian artisans respected across Europe. Historian AESIR Rosdahl notes, winter's limitations forced the Norse to turn inward, focusing on the refinement of craft skills that would become hallmarks of Viking culture. In addition to self-sufficiency, Norse communities relied on trade as a vital source of goods not available in their own lands. The challenging climate made it difficult to produce all the resources they needed, so they traded extensively for grains, metals, textiles, and other essentials. This need for trade would later evolve into an extensive network stretching from the British Isles to Byzantium. Scholar Søren Michael Sindbeck explains, Scandinavia's limited agricultural capacity necessitated a dependence on trade, which would eventually fuel the Norse expansion as they sought connections and resources abroad. The struggle to secure resources also led to a tradition of seasonal raiding. When crops failed or supplies ran low, Norse warriors would embark on expeditions seeking wealth and resources in neighbouring lands. What began as a survival strategy would later grow into a defining feature of the Viking Age. According to historian Anders Winroth, the early seasonal raids were driven less by conquest than by a need to supplement local resources, born out of necessity and honed by experience. Surviving in Scandinavia's harsh climate demanded resilience and adaptability. The Norse developed a way of life centered on resourcefulness, planning, and the ability to endure. It was a society forged by necessity, a culture that viewed every challenge as an opportunity to build strength and learn from the environment. Historian Neil Price reflects, the Norse way of life was shaped by endurance, a fundamental acceptance of hardship that made them uniquely prepared to face the uncertainties of exploration and conflict. The Norse embraced their environment's challenges, turning limitations into strengths. This adaptability, born out of necessity, would be a key factor in their later success as traders, explorers, and conquerors. From resilience in farming to expertise in craft and trade, their lives were a testament to survival in one of Europe's most unforgiving climates. For early Scandinavian societies, the sea was not just a boundary, but a lifeline. The North and Baltic Seas served as highways connecting distant communities and opening doors to new opportunities. These waters were rich with fish, which became a staple resource for coastal villages and an essential part of Norse diets. Fishing allowed them to sustain themselves, building skills that would later support long voyages. Historian Elsa Rosedal notes, the North and Baltic Seas were more than natural resources. They were vital arteries linking early Scandinavians to the world beyond their shores. The sea also united these scattered communities by offering them a common pathway for trade. While rugged terrain made overland travel difficult, the waterways allowed for relatively swift movement of goods and people, fostering early trade networks. By the late Iron Age, Scandinavian traders were navigating these seas regularly, exchanging resources such as furs, amber, and iron with other European communities. Archaeologist James Graham Campbell describes this maritime network as a means of unification for Scandinavian society, facilitating exchange that shaped Norse life well before the Viking Age. The Baltic Sea was especially significant as a gateway to the broader world. The peoples of Scandinavia engaged with Slavic and Baltic societies, exchanging not only goods but also ideas, tools, and techniques. This exchange laid the foundation for cultural ties and trade practices that the Vikings would later expand upon. Historian Mats Roslund observes, the Baltic trade routes were early conduits of knowledge and commerce, setting the stage for Scandinavian societies to become leaders in maritime trade and exploration. Yet trade was only part of the story. The North Sea offered early Norse sailors routes westward, reaching as far as the British Isles. These connections exposed Scandinavian communities to the wealth and resources of Western Europe, establishing relationships that would later evolve into more organized and frequent voyages. As historian John Haywood states, the North Sea was Scandinavia's bridge to the west, linking early Norse society with the distant lands that would later become focal points of Viking expansion. The seas also spurred innovation in shipbuilding. Early Norse vessels were crafted for both speed and durability, evolving into designs suited for fishing, trading, and exploration. As shipbuilding expertise developed, Scandinavian society began to craft the longships that would become legendary, capable of traversing both open oceans and shallow rivers. Maritime historian Jan Bill explains, "The development of the longship was a defining achievement of Norse society, driven by their dependence on the sea and their pursuit of connections beyond Scandinavia. For these early Scandinavian societies, the sea was a unifying force and a doorway to the world beyond. With each voyage, they gained knowledge, forged alliances, and developed the skills that would one day propel them into the Viking Age." Historian Leszek Gardewa reflects, the sea wasn't simply a resource, it was a formative element in Norse identity, fostering a culture of exploration that would echo across Europe. From fishing to exploration, the sea's role in Norse society was profound. It united distant communities, facilitated trade and innovation, and instilled in the Norse a resilience and adaptability that would carry them far beyond their homeland. Scandinavian expertise in shipbuilding began long before the Viking Age, with early Norse boats crafted for fishing, coastal travel, and trade. These vessels were typically small, powered by both oars and simple sails, designed to handle the varied waters of Scandinavia's coasts. Archaeologist Jan Bill notes, the evolution of Norse shipbuilding was a gradual process, beginning with smaller, utilitarian boats that connected communities and supported early trade. As communities grew and demands for mobility increased, Norse shipbuilders began to innovate. They developed sleeker, more resilient hulls and refined their techniques in wood shaping and waterproofing. These advances laid the groundwork for the ships that would eventually become known as longships, vessels that could carry warriors, goods, and ideas across vast distances. Scholar Sverre Bagge explains, shipbuilding was central to Norse society. With each advancement, they were able to reach further and adapt to the diverse challenges of maritime travel. The most defining feature of the Norse longship was its shallow draft, a design choice that allowed these vessels to travel in both open seas and shallow rivers. This versatility meant that longships could approach coastlines and riverbanks with ease, providing unmatched flexibility for both exploration and raids. Historian Elsa Rosdahl describes the longship's shallow draft as a revolutionary design that granted Norse sailors the freedom to navigate almost any waterway, bringing both trade and warfare to new frontiers. Another unique aspect of longship design was its symmetrical shape, which allowed it to move forward or backward with equal speed, a critical feature in unfamiliar waters where quick retreat might be necessary. This adaptability became essential to Viking success, enabling swift approaches and seamless escapes. Scholar John Haywood remarks, the double-ended design of the longship was an ingenious adaptation for both speed and maneuverability, symbolizing Norse adaptability and strategic prowess. The combination of sail and oar power further enhanced the longship's efficiency, with sails capturing the wind in open seas and oars providing precise control in rivers or near the shore. These vessels could navigate a wide range of environments and weather conditions. The Norse's understanding of wind and currents became an invaluable skill, honed over generations and allowing for unprecedented mobility. Historian James Graham Campbell states, mastery of both sail and oar made Norse ships a formidable presence on the water, capable of navigating seas, rivers, and coastlines with unparalleled versatility. For the Norse, these ships were more than vessels. They were the means by which they explored, traded, and expanded their world. The longship became a symbol of Norse resilience and ingenuity, embodying the spirit of a society that was unafraid to venture into the unknown. Historian Leszek Gardewa reflects the longship was a cultural icon for the Norse, representing their maritime skills, their connection to the sea, and their drive to push beyond familiar horizons. These early innovations in shipbuilding were not only technical achievements, they were cultural transformations that prepared the Norse for an age of exploration, trade, and conquest that would echo across Europe. The Norse were masters of metalworking, a skill essential to their survival, trade, and eventual dominance across Europe. Early Scandinavian metalworkers developed techniques that allowed them to produce tools and weaponry of remarkable strength and durability, crafted to withstand the rigors of daily life and combat. Historian James Barrett notes, the Norse developed an exceptional level of expertise in metallurgy, forging robust tools and weapons that became essential to both raiding and agriculture. Among their creations, Viking weapons were renowned for their quality and design. Axes, swords, and spears were crafted with a balance of function and artistry, each piece not only a tool of war, but also a symbol of status and cultural pride. Swords were particularly prized, often made with intricate hilt designs and carefully balanced blades. Each weapon was a personal artifact, often passed down through generations. Archaeologist Anne Pedersen describes Viking weaponry as a blend of artistry and practicality, where each sword or axe represented both the warrior's identity and the craftsman's skill. The Norse's expertise extended beyond basic function, incorporating unique decorative elements that reflected their beliefs and values. Many weapons were inlaid with symbols, patterns, and even mythological motifs, which personalized these items for their owners. Such detailing showcased a level of artistry that made Viking weaponry distinct. Historian Elsa Rosedal explains, Norse craftsmen imbued weapons with cultural meaning, using symbolic designs to express loyalty, power, and spiritual beliefs. Beyond weapons, Norse metalwork also produced armor and helmets that combined protective utility with elaborate craftsmanship. While iron chainmail and helmets offered essential protection in battle, these pieces often featured details such as engraved patterns or crests, highlighting the owner's status and identity. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson states, the Norse approached armor as they did weaponry, with a blend of practical engineering and artistic expression, transforming simple protective gear into items of personal pride. But Norse metalworking was not limited to weapons and armor. Everyday tools were crafted with the same skill, allowing for advancements in agriculture, building, and craftsmanship. From iron plows to chisels, these tools were crucial in farming and construction, supporting Norse settlements and enabling communities to thrive. Scholar Neil Price explains, metalworking was central to Norse society, not only for warfare but for the daily labor that sustained their communities and drove their economy. In Norse society, weaponry held a special significance beyond its practical use. Swords, axes, and armor became symbols of status and identity, with each piece reflecting the values and identity of the person who wielded it. The craftsmanship and artistry of these items made them far more than instruments of war. They were expressions of the Norse spirit, capturing the skill, resilience, and cultural pride that defined their way of life. Historian Leszek Gardewa reflects, for the Norse, weapons were a powerful extension of self, combining craftsmanship and cultural identity in a way that symbolized the Viking ethos. The skill of Norse metalworkers helped lay the foundation for a society prepared for both survival and conquest. Through their craftsmanship, they created tools, armor, and weapons that would support them in all aspects of life, marking the Norse as both formidable warriors and skilled artisans. and honor and reputation were the foundations of Norse society, values that held especially true for its warriors. In a world where survival often depended on the strength of the community, a warrior's personal honor was a measure of their worth. Bravery and resilience weren't just traits, they were expectations, setting a high standard for those who took up arms. Historian Jenny Jochens describes Norse honor as a guiding force in society, where a man's actions reflected not only on himself, but on his entire family and lineage. In battle, Norse warriors sought not only victory but also personal glory. Reputation was everything, and bravery on the battlefield was a way to cement one's legacy. To flee from a fight was seen as dishonorable, a stain that could tarnish not only the individual but also their kin. This commitment to bravery helped foster a culture of warriors who faced conflict without hesitation, believing that to die honorably was preferable to living in disgrace. Historian Neil Price explains, "In Norse society, honor was the currency of respect, and courage in battle was the surest way to earn it. Loyalty was another cornerstone of Norse warrior culture. A warrior's bond to their family, chieftain and fellow fighters was sacred. Warriors swore oaths of loyalty, pledging to protect their kin and their leader, even at great personal risk. This loyalty wasn't taken lightly. It was a commitment that defined the warrior's identity and ensured the stability of the community." Scholar John Lindo notes, "The Norse viewed loyalty as a fundamental virtue, one that bound warriors to their leaders and kin in a shared sense of honor and duty. Reputation and legacy extended beyond the individual. In Norse society, one's actions were remembered and recounted through generations, especially if those deeds embodied the values of bravery, loyalty, and resilience. Stories of heroic ancestors were told as lessons and as sources of pride, embedding the warrior ethos into the very fabric of Norse culture." Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson writes, "Norse warriors sought not only to live with honor, but to be remembered, knowing that a legacy of bravery was the greatest gift one could leave behind." The Norse warrior ethos was sustained through storytelling. Skalds or poets were tasked with preserving the tales of valor and sacrifice, recounting heroic deeds in verses that immortalized warriors' lives and deeds. These stories reinforced the ideals of courage and honor, inspiring new generations to uphold the same values. Historian Anders Winroth explains, "The Skalds' verses were the lifeblood of Norse heroism, crafting a narrative that bound warriors to a tradition of honor and sacrifice. This warrior culture, steeped in values of honor, loyalty, and courage, would come to define the Norse people during the Viking Age. The drive for personal glory and loyalty to kin shaped not only their approach to warfare, but also their interactions with the world beyond Scandinavia." As historian Elsa Rosdahl observes, the Viking Age ethos of honor and bravery was rooted in a society that viewed life as an opportunity to build a legacy, one that would carry forward into the afterlife. For the Norse, the pursuit of honor and reputation was more than a personal goal. It was a lifelong commitment to values that would echo through generations. This unwavering dedication to the warrior ethos laid the groundwork for a society that would face every challenge with courage and a sense of purpose, setting the Norse apart as both fierce fighters and respected leaders. In Norse society, the oral tradition was the primary means of preserving history, values, and myths. Stories weren't simply entertainment, they were vessels for the collective memory of the Norse people, passed down through generations and imprinted on the cultural fabric of their society. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson explains, "The oral tradition was central to Norse culture, functioning as an educational tool that preserved both the heroic and mythological past. Skalds, or poets, held a special place in Norse society. These skilled storytellers were not only keepers of knowledge, but also guardians of identity, weaving tales of gods, heroes, and ancestral deeds that shaped the Norse worldview. Through their verses, skalds immortalized events and values, reinforcing ideals like bravery, loyalty, and honor. Historian Roberta Frank describes skalds as craftsmen of language, whose poetic skills were essential in preserving and transmitting the cultural and ethical values of Norse society. These tales were filled with symbolism, capturing the Norse worldview through myth and allegory. Stories of gods like Odin, Thor, and Loki, along with the exploits of legendary heroes, reflected both the spiritual beliefs and the ethical framework of the society. The myths explained natural phenomena, addressed the mysteries of life and death, and provided moral lessons that resonated deeply with their audience. Scholar Jesse Byock notes, Norse mythology was a repository of cultural wisdom, with skalds crafting tales that provided not only entertainment but also guidance on how to live and die with honor. One of the earliest sources of Norse tradition and mythology is the Poetic Edda, a collection of Old Norse poems that was later written down but began as an oral tradition. These poems, filled with themes of creation, destruction, and the gods' interactions with humanity, served as both religious text and cultural narrative. The stories within the Poetic Edda reflect the Norse beliefs in fate and the cyclical nature of existence, ideas that deeply influence their outlook on life. Historian Andy Orchard explains, the Poetic Edda captured the essence of Norse mythology, distilling the values, fears, and hopes of a people bound to their gods and heroes. Another foundational work, the Heimskringla, compiled by the Icelandic historian Snorri Sturluson, is a saga that tells of the lives of the Norse kings. Though written in the 13th century, it draws upon the rich oral tradition that preceded it, preserving stories that likely existed in various forms for centuries. The Heimskringla was instrumental in recording the exploits of Scandinavian rulers and shaped the Norse understanding of their own history. Historian Lee M. Hollander writes, Snorri's work provided a structured narrative for Norse history, merging myth, legend, and historical fact in a way that emphasized the cultural ideals of the Viking Age. The sagas and poems created through the oral tradition were more than mere stories. They were a framework for the Norse identity. Through them, the Norse people connected with their past, learning the deeds of ancestors and the will of the gods. Historian Neil Price explains, oral tradition was the soul of Norse society, shaping the collective memory and uniting generations through shared narratives of honor, struggle, and divine mystery. Through the words of the skalds, Norse myths and values were brought to life, creating a lasting legacy that would define not only the Viking Age, but also the cultural memory of Scandinavia. These stories were the threads that bound society together, linking the past with the present and keeping the spirit of the Norse people alive. In early Norse society, family and kinship were the core of social life, providing stability, protection, and identity. These bonds extended beyond the immediate family to include a network of relatives and allies, each bound by loyalty and mutual support. A family's honor was shared by its members, meaning that the actions of one could affect the reputation and status of all. Historian Jenny Jochens describes the Norse family as a tightly knit unit, where kinship bonds extended into every aspect of life, from daily survival to the pursuit of honor and social standing. Family ties offered more than just emotional support. They were a fundamental aspect of survival. In a society where communities relied on cooperation to endure the hardships of the environment, families pooled resources, skills, and labor. A family's collective strength ensured its members were cared for and protected, especially during difficult times or conflicts. Scholar Neil Price notes, In Norse culture, kinship bonds were essential for survival, creating a network of support that safeguarded individuals in a harsh and often uncertain world. Kinship also shaped the social hierarchy, with families competing for honor and influence within their communities. This hierarchy was reinforced by the concept of AESIR, or lineage, which tracked a family's ancestry and established its social rank. A family with a respected lineage commanded more influence and opportunities within the community, and individuals were often judged based on their family's reputation. Historian Jesse Byock explains, the concept of lineage in Norse society was central to one's social standing, with each person carrying the weight and honor of their ancestors. Marriage was more than a personal commitment. It was a political alliance that strengthened bonds between families and tribes. Marriages were often arranged to secure peace, reinforce loyalty, or increase influence, with each union carefully negotiated for mutual benefit. By forming alliances through marriage, families could expand their network of allies, ensuring their safety and extending their social reach. Archaeologist AESIR Rosdahl states, marriage in Norse society was a strategic alliance, a means of building loyalty and forging bonds that could endure through generations. These marriage alliances set a precedent for broader political strategies that would become common in the Viking Age. As tribes formed alliances and combined their strengths, Norse communities gained stability, creating the groundwork for the larger-scale cooperation that would later drive their expeditions and settlements. Historian John Lindow notes, the Norse tradition of political marriages foreshadowed the alliances that would shape the Viking Age, uniting clans in pursuit of common goals. The kinship network was the backbone of early Norse society, connecting families through bonds of loyalty, honor, and mutual respect. These connections offered protection and established a sense of belonging as each family played its role within the larger social structure. Historian Thomas Dubois describes Norse kinship as the framework that unified communities, embedding each family within a web of obligations, loyalty, and shared purpose. In a culture defined by resilience and loyalty, family was more than a support system. It was a legacy. Through kinship and marriage, Norse society built a foundation of alliances and shared values that would shape their world and carry forward into the Viking Age, forming the very basis of Norse identity. Long before the Viking Age, Scandinavia was connected to a vast network of trade routes that linked it to Europe, the Baltic, and even as far as Asia. These routes were the lifelines through which goods flowed, bringing resources into Scandinavia and taking Norse products to distant markets. Historian James Barrett explains, the Norse were active in a complex trade network that extended across Europe and beyond, with routes that predated the Viking Age by centuries. Scandinavians traded local resources like furs, amber, and iron, highly prized items that made their way to markets across Europe. Furs from the north were valued for their warmth and quality, while amber, known as the gold of the north, was in high demand for jewelry. These goods were exchanged for items not easily obtained in Scandinavia, such as silver, wine, and finely crafted luxury items from the Mediterranean and the East. Archaeologist AESIR Rosdahl notes, amber and fur, the region's primary exports, served as a bridge linking Scandinavia with the wealth and luxuries of more southern lands. Silver was particularly sought after in Norse society, not only for its monetary value, but also for its symbolic and decorative uses. Silver coins from the Islamic world and Europe flowed into Scandinavia, where they were often melted down and crafted into jewelry and status symbols. This influx of silver would later support the Norse economy and fuel their ambitions during the Viking Age. Historian Neil Price explains, the arrival of silver from distant lands introduced a new form of wealth into Scandinavia, transforming it into a significant resource for both trade and cultural expression. These trade exchanges exposed Scandinavians to foreign goods, customs and technologies, gradually shaping their society. Norse traders encountered everything from glassware and pottery to exotic spices, silk and textiles, goods that broadened their understanding of the world beyond Scandinavia. Scholar Søren Michael Sindbeck notes, trade with distant cultures familiarized the Norse with a diversity of products and practices, setting the groundwork for their later interactions during the Viking Age. Through these early interactions, the Norse learned valuable skills in negotiation, language, and the intricacies of foreign markets. Merchants became adept at navigating cultural differences, which would later benefit them as they expanded into new territories. Historian John Hayward observes, the skills developed in these early trade relationships prepared Norse traders and explorers to interact with the diverse societies they would encounter during the Viking Age. Exposure to foreign goods and technologies also influenced Norse craftsmanship. Items like glass and pottery were initially imported, but Norse artisans soon began to incorporate these new materials and techniques into their own work, blending imported styles with local aesthetics. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson states the influence of foreign craftsmanship inspired Norse artisans who adapted new techniques and designs to fit their own cultural expressions. These early trade routes were essential in connecting Scandinavia to the larger world, creating a foundation of economic and cultural exchange that would eventually drive Norse expansion. Historian Thomas Dubois reflects, trade connected the Norse people to a larger multicultural web of interaction, laying the groundwork for the expansive reach they would achieve during the Viking Age. Through these trade networks, the Norse came to see themselves not as isolated, but as active participants in a vast web of exchange, equipped with the skills and knowledge that would propel them into the Viking Age with confidence and ambition. Roman influence on early Norse society was significant, leaving a lasting impact that resonated through trade, material culture, and ideas. Roman coins, pottery, and other artifacts have been found in Scandinavian burial sites, evidence of an active trade network that brought the Norse into contact with the Roman world. These items were more than goods. They were symbols of wealth and status within Norse communities, valued for their connection to a distant, powerful empire. Historian Neil Price explains Roman artifacts in Scandinavia underscore a web of exchange, bringing not only goods but also cultural prestige and a taste of the empire's grandeur. These Roman imports influenced the Norse in ways that went beyond economics. Exposure to Roman luxury items, such as glassware and finely crafted jewelry, introduced new ideas about craftsmanship and artistry, shaping Scandinavian aesthetics. Norse artisans soon began incorporating elements of Roman design into their own work, creating a blend of local and foreign influences. Archaeologist Elsa Rosedal notes, the Norse adoption of Roman styles in their own art reflects a selective integration of Roman cultural elements, shaping a unique Scandinavian identity. Trade with the Romans also brought new ideas and knowledge, from construction techniques to military organization, which began to influence aspects of Norse society. Although the Norse never adopted Roman governance or built large cities, Roman exposure inspired them to experiment with their own forms of community organization and military tactics, setting the stage for the social structures that would define the Viking Age. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson describes this as a subtle but profound influence, as Roman models offered a glimpse of centralized power and organization that would later be adapted in Norse society. Alongside Roman influence, the Germanic tribes of continental Europe had a profound impact on the Norse. Many Germanic practices and beliefs paralleled those of early Scandinavian society, from the importance of kinship bonds to governance through assemblies of local leaders. These assemblies, or things, were gatherings where chieftains and freemen discussed laws, settled disputes, and made collective decisions, laying the groundwork for a decentralized system of governance. Scholar John Lindo explains, "The thing was a cornerstone of Norse and Germanic governance, a place where warriors and chieftains gathered to negotiate and uphold societal rules. In warfare, the Germanic influence was equally strong. Germanic tribes were known for their skilled warriors, tactical use of shields, and emphasis on personal bravery, qualities that resonated deeply with the Norse. Many of these techniques and values were adopted by Norse warriors, blending with their own traditions to form the foundation of the warrior ethos that would characterize the Viking Age." Historian Gareth Williams notes, "Germanic military practices left a lasting mark on Norse warriors, infusing them with the tactics, techniques, and warrior code that would later define Viking raids." The Germanic tribes also shared religious beliefs and mythological figures that heavily influenced the Norse pantheon. Gods like Odin, Thor, and Freyr were common across Germanic cultures, shaping a shared spiritual framework that resonated throughout Scandinavia. The Germanic and Norse people saw their gods as powerful, mysterious beings who guided their lives and battles, reinforcing a sense of destiny and connection to the divine. Historian Hilda Roderick Ellis Davidson explains, "The shared mythology between the Norse and their Germanic neighbours forged a spiritual bond that transcended borders, embedding the values of courage and fate into their worldview. These influences from Rome and Germanic tribes shaped Norse society in profound ways, leaving a legacy of cultural exchange, shared beliefs, and practical knowledge. The Romans offered glimpses of an organized world beyond their own, while the Germanic tribes reinforced the Norse warrior code and kinship bonds." Historian Thomas Dubois reflects, "The combination of Roman luxury and Germanic traditions equipped the Norse with a distinct identity, blending external influences into a society that was both innovative and deeply rooted in its own customs." Through their interactions with the Romans and Germanic neighbours, the Norse developed a unique blend of customs, beliefs, and social structures that would become essential in the centuries to come. These connections, though subtle at times, provided them with tools and ideas that would later define their culture and drive their expansion during the Viking Age. By the late 8th century, population growth in Scandinavia placed increasing pressure on limited resources. The rugged landscapes of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark were not particularly suited for large-scale agriculture, with only small pockets of arable land available. As families grew, communities struggled to support themselves on the resources at hand, creating a need to look beyond their borders for sustenance. Historian AESIR Rosedal explains, "Population growth strained the natural resources of Scandinavia, pushing the Norse to seek wealth and opportunity beyond their homelands. The short growing season and harsh climate compounded these challenges, meaning that even the fertile land was limited in what it could produce. Farmers often faced unpredictable crop yields, creating uncertainty in food supplies. As families expanded and plots of land were subdivided, it became harder to maintain a stable income from farming alone." Archaeologist Neil Price notes, "The scarcity of arable land and the unpredictability of agriculture in Scandinavia left many Norse communities with few options for sustaining themselves." With limited opportunities at home, young Norsemen were motivated to seek resources abroad. As families grew, the tradition of dividing property among heirs meant that each generation had smaller portions of land, intensifying competition and encouraging younger generations to look for fortune elsewhere. Many joined expeditions to explore, trade, or raid, seeking wealth that could secure their own futures. Historian Peter Sawyer explains, "Economic necessity and social pressures combined to make overseas ventures an attractive solution for young Norse men with limited prospects at home. In addition to wealth, Norse expeditions were driven by a need for new land. This pursuit of land wasn't limited to temporary raids, but extended to settlement. Areas with more favourable climates, such as parts of the British Isles, Francia, and the Baltic coast, offered not only resources, but the chance to establish permanent communities. These new settlements could sustain agriculture and trade, providing a long-term solution to the pressures of overpopulation. Historian Thomas Dubois notes, "The Norse expansion was fueled by a desire for resources and fertile land, a means to secure stability in a world of limited local opportunities." Social competition within Norse communities also played a role in pushing men to seek fortunes abroad. Reputation and wealth were closely linked, and success in raiding, trading, or exploration could elevate one's social standing back home. Overseas ventures thus became a path to prestige and power, allowing ambitious Norse individuals to gain both wealth and status. Scholar Anders Winroth explains, overseas success provided a route to social advancement in Norse society, where status was closely tied to wealth and reputation. The pressures of population growth, limited land, and social competition pushed the Norse people to embark on voyages of exploration, trade, and settlement. These journeys, driven by necessity, would ultimately shape the Viking Age, transforming Scandinavia into the centre of a vast network that stretched across Europe and beyond. Economic necessity and social ambition propelled the Norse to venture far from home, forging a legacy that would reshape both their world and the wider history of medieval Europe. In early Norse society, chieftains held considerable power, governing local territories and acting as both leaders and protectors of their people. However, as these leaders vied for influence, competition among chieftains for resources and land became fierce. This rivalry often led to conflict, where raids were not only a means of survival, but also a way to assert dominance and accumulate wealth. Historian Elsa Rosdahl explains, raiding offered chieftains a path to enhance their reputation and resources, fueling an endless cycle of competition and conquest. The drive for power and resources was a matter of both status and survival. Successful raids allowed chieftains to reward their followers with wealth and protection, reinforcing loyalty and attracting new allies. This consolidation of power became crucial, as chieftains who amassed wealth could secure the loyalty of more warriors, ensuring their dominance in local conflicts. Archaeologist Neil Price notes, in Norse society, wealth was both a symbol and a tool of power, with successful leaders using it to secure loyalty and elevate their status. As certain families accumulated wealth and influence, power became concentrated in fewer hands, intensifying rivalries. The most ambitious individuals sought ways to enhance their standing, often looking beyond Scandinavia for new opportunities. Overseas ventures provided these chieftains with the chance to claim new lands, establish trade routes, and gain resources that could reinforce their power at home. Historian Peter Sawyer explains, for ambitious Norse chieftains, expansion abroad was a logical step, a means to gain prestige and resources beyond what their local environment could provide. These power struggles within Norse society meant that many young warriors found themselves drawn to the idea of raiding or settling abroad, either as a means of wealth building or as a path to personal advancement. For many, participating in raids or exploring new lands under a powerful chieftain became a route to gaining their own prestige and possibly securing a future leadership position. Scholar Anders Winroth notes, the ambitions of chieftains provided young Norsemen with opportunities to gain wealth and status, inspiring loyalty and the drive to venture beyond their homelands. The rise of chieftains and the concentration of power transformed Norse society into a network of ambitious leaders and loyal warriors, all motivated by the promise of wealth, status, and legacy. These power dynamics created an environment where conflict and expansion became intertwined, laying the groundwork for the Viking Age. Historian Thomas Dubois reflects, local power struggles among chieftains shaped the Norse drive for expansion, as the pursuit of wealth and status fueled a society ready to explore, trade, and conquer. Through a combination of ambition, rivalry, and the search for resources, the Norse chieftains set the stage for an age of exploration and conquest, a legacy that would echo across Europe and beyond. The Norse were not only skilled warriors, but also brilliant innovators, particularly in the fields of shipbuilding and navigation. Their longships, designed with a shallow draft and symmetrical shape, were uniquely suited for both open seas and shallow rivers, giving the Norse unmatched mobility and flexibility. These vessels allowed them to quickly navigate foreign coastlines, strike with precision, and retreat just as swiftly. Historian James Graham Campbell states, "The longship was a technological marvel that gave the Norse the advantage of speed and versatility essential for the raiding and expansion that defined the Viking Age. Equally important was their navigation expertise. Norse seafarers developed methods to chart courses by observing the sun, stars, and ocean currents, a skill that allowed them to reach distant lands with remarkable accuracy. This advanced knowledge of navigation meant they could undertake longer voyages than many other cultures of the time, reaching the British Isles, Francia, and even the shores of North America. Scholar Neil Price explains, Norse navigation was a blend of tradition and skill, giving them the confidence to explore the unknown and the ability to return home. Advances in metallurgy also played a crucial role in Norse readiness for raiding and warfare. Iron swords, axes, and reinforced shields gave Norse warriors an edge in battle, with weapons that were not only durable but also symbols of their status and warrior ethos. This mastery in metalworking allowed the Norse to equip themselves with tools that could withstand the demands of both combat and survival. Historian Ellis Davidson notes, "The Norse approach to weaponry was practical and sophisticated, as each piece reflected the warrior's strength and the community's craftsmanship. Together, these technological advancements combined with socio-political pressures to create the conditions that set the Viking Age in motion. With a limited amount of arable land and intense competition among chieftains, the Norse were increasingly motivated to seek wealth and resources beyond their shores. Technological prowess enabled them to act on this motivation, transforming societal pressure into action. Historian Peter Sawyer explains, the combination of socio-political need and maritime expertise was a catalyst for Norse expansion, propelling them from isolated communities into a force that reshaped Europe. By the time of the Viking Age, the Norse were equipped not only with the tools of war but also with the skills of explorers and merchants. These technological advancements allowed them to expand into regions across Europe and beyond, turning local ambitions into a broader phenomenon that would shape history. Scholar Anders Winroth observes, the Vikings' technological and navigational expertise transformed a fragmented society into a formidable force, ready to engage with and challenge the world. Armed with advanced technology and driven by both necessity and ambition, the Norse embarked on a journey of expansion that would become their legacy. These technological tools allowed them not only to survive, but to thrive on the frontiers of the known world. As we've seen, the Viking Age didn't begin with a single event, but was the product of generations shaped by a challenging environment, fierce competition, and innovative craftsmanship. From the rise of chieftains and family loyalties to advancements in shipbuilding, each factor brought the Norse to the edge of their known world, poised for something unprecedented. They were not only warriors, but a people of resilience, adaptability, and ambition. Together, these elements became the storm that would reshape Europe and leave an enduring mark on history. The Norse were now ready to launch beyond their shores, driven by both necessity and desire, prepared to face whatever lay across the horizon. Join us next time as we continue our journey with Storm from the North, the dawn of the Viking Age, where we'll uncover the earliest raids and explore how this spirit of adventure turned the Norse into some of history's most impactful explorers and conquerors. If you enjoyed this journey into the origins of the Viking Age, we'd love to have you join us on future voyages. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of Storm from the North. And if you'd like to dive even deeper, consider joining us on Patreon. For the cost of a coffee or two, you'll get access to exclusive ebooks and supplemental content to enrich each video. It's our way of bringing you closer to the fascinating world of the Vikings and supporting the creation of even more in-depth content. Thank you for watching, and we can't wait to explore more together.